So let's go to the next slide, please. So just some of the housekeeping. We want to make sure that everybody's aware of the procedures. So in the event of an emergency, out through the doors to the left and keep going out onto the grassed area. If you go out too far, there's a lot of planes out there. Don't go that far, but out to the green. Restrooms are out this way to the right over there. So if anybody needs to use the restrooms, morning and afternoon tea, lunch will be served in the foyer, just at the front there, and there's coffee out there at the moment. During the Q&A, we'll be using Mentimeter, and Davis is the expert in Mentimeter. He knows all about it. So if there are any problems, blame Davis. Okay. So for people online, we'll be recording today's session. So be aware that we are recording the session. In the event of emergency, follow your own plan online. You know where your toilets are. Can you remain on mute throughout the presentations unless you want to actually make a comment, because it can get quite distracting for everyone. And if you do, use the raise hand in the Zoom to actually ask a question. Yep, please. Quite a few people. Oh. Great, thank you. So we'll have presentations from our program leads. So the program leads are Sarah Purdy, she will be online. Dennis Chang, Dennis is here in person. Be gentle with Dennis, he left very early this morning in Sydney. And if he does fall asleep during his presentation, give him a phone. Mariam, so Mariam's online, she'll be presenting online. And Tobias is here. And Tech Marcini, unfortunately, was going to be here but can't make it. He's fallen ill, he's just come back from Nepal and brought something back with him. So I'll be presenting on Tech's behalf. Yep. So we're going to go through each of the programs and give a little bit more detail about where they are. This is where our thinking is, and the thinking is that we've generated through one-on-one conversations. We want to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation that goes through this. So as I said, there will be an opportunity for us 1 or 2 questions at the end of this session, and then there will be a larger Q&A later on after we have a response from everybody else. So is everybody happy with that at this stage? Great, thank you. So if we could go to Sarah's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Gavin, very much. And it's can everybody hear me okay? The volume is all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's fantastic to have the opportunity to present the hemp production program as it stands at the moment. I've been a research scientist now for 15 years, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been leading the New South Wales DPI's medicinal cannabis research program in our protected cropping environment. Before that, I was with the University of Sydney, and looking at traits such as seed size and the chemical profile of the plant that underlied yield traits in chickpea. And for 7 years prior to that, I was in lignocellulosic crops, looking at how to optimize the cell wall for different end uses. So these past projects that I've worked and managed on have obviously influenced how I see the program at the moment. But as Gavin has said, this is a very dynamic process, and the whole purpose, I think, really of today is to get your feedback and how this program can be designed to best facilitate what the industry needs to make hemp in Australia all it can be. This program starts with the seed that is planted and it ends at the farm gate when our crop leaves. The systems that I envisage it encompassing, nothing is excluded, so broadacre, protected cropping, and also outdoor cultivation for medicinal crops, so perhaps on a smaller scale and broadacre. And it aims to deliver elite germplasm that is targeted to specific end uses for those 3 types of crop, and to define the best practices in agronomy and crop protection and mechanization to make sure that we maximize the yields. And next slide, please, Liz. So firstly, we're starting with the seeds and the genetics that are actually held within that seed that are ultimately going to determine what we get from it and the quality. So I'm looking to breed new elite germplasm to produce high yields of target end products. And firstly, to do this, we're going to have to identify what those traits actually are. What do we actually want to improve? So this is 3 examples of areas that I think we could look at. So firstly, the morphology of those plants. Morphology is something I really could probably talk about far more than I ought to, but I think that there's a lot of space for improvement, particularly for the medicinal varieties, for indoor cultivation, but also for the seed, and mainly to facilitate harvesting and the spacing of those plants within their environment. I think that particularly medicinal lines, that at the moment, they're often quite large and cumbersome, and they take a lot of work to harvest. So I think we could improve on that. Also high CBD lines, which are suitable for outdoor or broadacre cultivation. Most of the lines that we have medicinally at the moment have been bred in Canada. But if you look at a solar intensity map of Canada and Australia, it probably doesn't come as any surprise to learn that on average, Australia is getting about 30% more solar intensity radiation than Canada does. So in fact, if you actually look at those maps, the best location in Canada is equal to the worst location for solar in Australia. So I think that we can improve on the CBD lines or the medicinal lines if we're looking for outdoor, or even when we're growing them in glass houses. And then the cell wall properties optimized for different end uses. To achieve this, we'll use targeted breeding, which will be achieved either through classical breeding or through advanced breeding technologies. And I know that in the Futures program, that this will be touched on more, some of those approaches that we might want to take. And then once we've got these new elite seeds, or what we hope to be elite seeds, we'll need to test them in multi-location trials to ensure they are consistent across different environments, and indeed where those performance boundaries actually lie. Next slide, please. Then we'll move on to the agronomy and the crop protection, which is optimizing the production practices to make sure that we are minimizing the risk from pests and diseases and maximizing the yield. From the agronomy, I think the timing and rate of the inputs that we put on is going to be critical, so the fertilizer and irrigation. And what I want to say here is that I'm not planning on starting at ground zero from this, that there's been technological leaps and leaps in agronomy in other crops that I think we can adopt in the hemp. So one example I'd give is that CRDC very proudly states on their website, quite rightly, that it now takes half as much water to produce a bale of cotton as it did 25 years ago. So I think that we can look to what these advances have been in other crops and then apply them to the hemp to get those advantages more quickly. I'd also like to include sensor technologies in our field sites and our trial sites from the very beginning, so that we can start to build the predictive models and algorithms that can ultimately produce decision-making tools for growers right from the outset. DPI has got an excellent reputation for pest and disease management and control and producing new varieties with resistance. So we'll be wanting to identify what those main risks are in our different hemp crops, and then to define the different IPM strategies for those different crops with the different end uses. I'll be looking at developing and applying new and non-chemical technologies for plant protection, so thinking about things like the RNAi bioclays perhaps, and approaches for early detection of outbreaks so we can get on top of problems before they become huge problems. Next slide, please. And finally, onto the mechanization, which I'm looking at to improve the efficiency and minimizing the labor demands. Firstly, thinking about planting systems. So we know we can directly drill, but for some of the systems, but I think the establishment of the planting date, depth, and rates for different crops has not been as well defined, and particularly if we're thinking of, which we are, of expanding hemp production more nationally. So you know, what are those processes that we will need to determine? And also then for the outdoor medicinal, if we're thinking about doing that, we need a purely female crop. And again, I think in the Futures programme, the technology to be able to do that will be discussed. But if we're producing our plants through cloning or tissue culture, how do we then get them into the ground outdoor on a much larger scale? So I was thinking about some of the techniques that they use within the horticulture industry, where your seeds are automatically sown in a nursery environment, and then a plug planting machine can automate their positioning into the field. But again, the density and locations and that kind of thing will have to be defined. And then onto the harvesting systems. For the medicinal crops, labor is the biggest draw on resources, and at the moment harvesting those big plants is very time consuming, and it also generates a lot of waste, which then has to be gotten rid of. So thinking also back to the comments that I made on morphology, and I think the steps that we can take there, but then also I think there is scope for harvesting technologies for protected cropping and medicinal crops more generally. And any technologies that we develop for medicinal crops will have to go through GMP certification, which we can also look to do. And thinking environmentally, looking at things like the changes in soil carbon with stubble management practices as we move, go through land use change into hemp, and how we can best manage that to have a kind of minimum impact on the environment and maximize carbon sequestration. So that's the end of my presentation, but like I said, this is a very dynamic process, and I'm really looking forward to being able to engage with you today to get your feedback and to build this program to best serve industry. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That was really good. That gave a really good overview of where we're at. Are there any brief questions now before we move on to the next section? Do you want to, Lachlan, I'll pick on you straight away. Do you want to talk a little bit, or just comment briefly on the ESG and the approaches that the Queensland Hemp Association is trying to take with those?
Sure. So we've set pretty much our main focus and agenda this year to sit down with the Minister of Ag to gain support, as well as collaborate with the Queensland Farmers Federation to support getting hemp as an approved biological plant, biological plant carbon sequestrator on the ESG list. So at the moment, when we approach them, the only reason as to why hemp isn't a part of that list is because it's never been fortunate before. So at least there's no egos or emotions tied to that approval being changed. There just needs to be some third-party supportive data which is out there. We've recently done a test of EQ on dry material carbon sequestered, and we got roughly on average 26 to 32 tonnes of carbon from dry matter material per hectare, which equates to quite a lot of ACCUs over a dual cropping period in an annual period. So yeah, that's what we're doing as a part with Queensland Hemp Association. It's an added revenue stream, so the fourth revenue stream is for a hemp crop. It just adds to the benefits, and I guess to the favours putting hemp as a rotational crop.
Great, thanks very much. Do we have any questions online?
Yeah, and 2 questions.
Yep. We have some questions online. So Eric Holling has completely agreed on the seed genetic selection importance. Further, it's important to identify seeds that are specific to end user products. And I think we all recognise that as a very important part of that. Stand have clients around the world, and so many early adopting countries selected genetics which produce products that cannot easily sell globally due to drivers' regulations. Now we're working with them to identify the end game, to identify transitioning genetics. So we'll just take that as a comment. So Olivia?
Hi, Sarah. Olivia Reynolds from AgriFutures.
Hello.
Hi. I'm keen to hear what the outcomes for industry are that you envisage for this program of research.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Olivia, could you just say that again? It's a little low.
Stand up, Olivia, so project.
Sorry.
I'm keen to hear what the outcomes for industry are for this program of research, please.
Yep. Okay. So I'm envisaging new varieties of seed that will be high yielding, so that there'll be better options to achieve those yields, and that will have the best practice agronomy down, so that you know there's advice on how to actually grow, how to maximize the outputs, and to protect that crop. Does that answer that?
So some of those things are going to be putting together those packages. That there's a lot of information that's already out there, and we know that people are doing this in many pockets around
Yeah.
Australia, and also through some of the work that AgriFutures is doing and some of the work that's outside of the AgriFutures sphere as well. What we want to be able to do is to bring that all together and integrate that, and we can then feed that into our training and vocational training and extension packages that we'll be delivering as part of our 5th arm to this. Yep. Tim?
Sarah, Tim Schmidt. Is there further considerations with the relation to the harvesting systems? Given that there's different production systems already established here, there's different requirements for the raw material to be presented for processing. I just wonder whether there might be more research in that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the question. I couldn't get the end of the question again.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We're just trying to get the mic going.
I've cranked my speaker volume right up, so maybe it'll be, yeah.
But be careful, do that blow out of seat.
Blow you out of the chair. Yeah, so the last part of the question was that in observing different systems that are already present, there's different requirements for material to be presented for processing, which would require an understanding of the harvesting systems part of the research, I would have thought. So I just wondered whether there was further considerations in researching that part of the project as well.
Sorry, I'm still struggling with this one. Okay, so this is the harvesting systems for different crops. Is that the question?
More you explain.
Yeah, so and I probably won't use the microphone. So I think what your question is coming down to is the different approaches that we have to use for different types of cropping and end products of what's actually coming out of it.
In relation, specifically in relation with fibre.
Yeah, so being able to, we can harvest the seed if it's about that tall, but if we want to be able to do dual purpose or fibre only, then our harvesting technologies are going to have to be responsive to that and be able to develop different types of harvesting technologies around it. And I think that we are looking at doing that. Yes, we are looking, and we have been actively looking for partners in that area. We believe that we have 1, possibly 2 within that area, but we're still going to sign them up at that final step. But we are aware of that. Okay,
Thank you, Gavin. Sorry.
that's all right, Sarah. So I think we might leave that and move on to the next part. So the
Just one recording in progress.
sorry, James, you're having trouble hearing that? Okay, so we're trying to capture all the questions. We might come back to some of those a little bit further. Dennis, I might get you to present from over here so that
You have to be exactly on that spot.
Yeah, that's
I might use the microphone so that people can hear me. Is that clear enough? Please, where's my unmute button? Not just kidding.
I've got it.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and people. I mean, so good to see so many familiar faces, and also some people online. Actually, I'm Dennis Chang. I'm part of the Nickham Health Research Institute at Western Sydney University. So this particular hemp for health program, we want to achieve two overall aims. One is to not just research and development to support and grow the use of hemp medicinal cannabis for nutraceutical, nutritional, medicinal use for both humans and animals as well. And secondly, I want to assist industry to register cannabis product with the TGA. And again, it doesn't have to be limited to TGA, it could be FDA and other jurisdiction in the future. I'm not saying that we develop the dossier for industry. It's more like helping to develop those research evidence needed to help to assist you to register your product with the TGA and other drug regulators in the future. Next slide. So this is a list of the capacity, if you like, actually from the combined team, obviously Western Sydney and Southern Cross University, Southern Queensland, Deakin, and other, and DPI as well. And so, for example, we do have a very good facility, for example, within Nickham and also Southern Cross University, we have a TGA license analytical laboratory. So also we have within Nickham, we have Office of Drug Control license medicinal cannabis laboratory. Does give us the capacity to do all the phytochemical analysis of that. Actually, we also, in that context, we also want to work with Program 1 and Program 4 in particular, and try to actually to select those genetics that actually produce the ideal combination of the cannabinoids. And that can be actually developed into product and to either for nutritional or medicinal uses in the future. So we also have a very a good pharmacology facility within the team so that we could actually conduct various pharmacological testing, including pharmacokinetic studies, and which is needed for many of the medicinal cannabis registration with TGA, as well as a mechanistic study, in particular relating to, for example, how those major cannabinoids interact with each other. And then on that basis, we can choose the optimal combination of those. And also that information can feed back to the Program 1 and Program 4, and to inform what is the best genetics and to produce that ideal combination of the cannabinoids. So certainly we have already established a very significant phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial capacity, and even phase 1, which is the pharmacokinetic studies between us and Southern Cross University team, and which allowed us to undertake a multi-center clinical trial to evaluate efficacy and safety of those medicinal cannabis products and hemp-based as well. And certainly we are also very much into the development of the novel, either hemp-based or medicinal cannabis-based product as well. So based on those research I just mentioned. And we are keen to develop intellectual property, commercialization, and manufacturing pathway. For example, we just finished constructing a manufacturing facility within Western Sydney University that actually can be converted in the future to manufacture some of the hemp medicinal-based products under the GMP condition. And then certainly education, working with the education program lead and Professor Ted's, what's his name? Let's see. To educate prescribers and users and about safe use of medicinal cannabis or hemp cannabis product as well. So I'm not saying that we do all of that, but it's at the end of the day, it is a still industry-led program. So we really want to demonstrate that that's kind of a series of things we could do, have a capacity to do, and then we're really keen to sit down with the industry partner to work out exactly what we could do to help you to achieve your vision and goals. Next slide. Over the last several weeks, we have been talking to various industry partners already committed, and this is what the Hemp for Health program could look like. So we're still very happy to modify that based on the discussion, further discussion with industry partner. For example, we have 3 areas we want to work in. The first area is sort of research and development of hemp-based products. The second area is research and development for medicinal cannabis product, because there are 2 different categories, obviously, as you know. And then the third area is that we want to assist industry to achieve those registrations through clinical evaluation, clinical trials, and pharmacokinetic studies of existing product, and to help you to achieve the registration with drug regulators. So those overall, that's the 3 key activities we want to do, and plus education, as I already said. So in the first areas, there's 1 or 2 projects we want to do based on our industry partners' interests. For example, we want to develop hemp-based natural product for nutritional and health benefit for both humans and animals. And so obviously there are 1 or 2 company already interested in animal product as well, not just human. Obviously with hemp seed and hemp leaf and hemp flowers. So obviously that's the more along the line of the natural product development. And certainly the second one is we also want to see whether we actually could combine some of the active ingredient of other natural product, other medicinal herbs, and to combine that with some of the hemp-based, not CBD or THC, more like a terpene and other sort of base product, and to combine them to achieve a better therapeutic outcome as well. Next slide. So this the second area is medicinal cannabis. That's where the novelty will come from, and also lots of modern biomedical and pharmaceutical technology could come in as well. For example, we are thinking about to look at the synergy studies and to look at the interaction of the major and minor cannabinoids, how they interact with each other, how actually CBD interact with THC or CBC, CBG, as well as the terpenes, and to inform, actually we can take this information back to the field and to look at how best we could select those genetic variants and to have those unique combination that could potentially achieve the best outcome of that. So that's one thing we could do. And certainly we are also very interested in developing some novel preparation or formulation, as well as a delivery system, in particular relating to nanoparticle packaging, because we do have an in-house expertise in developing nanoparticle packaging to facilitate the bioavailability, to facilitate delivery of those active components into the target organs, etc., etc. And thirdly, we also could actually look into various routes of administration, oral versus topical, or sublingual versus inhalation, and target specific disease to see which is the best route of administration for that particular disease. So we can certainly look into that, combining with all the technology we talk about in the second slide. Next one, please. I thought I'm sleepy. Thanks. The next one is obviously, as I said, we want to develop the clinical evidence to support your product registration with drug regulator. So this is not limited because we listed 2 or 3 of them based on our partners' interests. For example, we want to look at the pharmacokinetic study in humans, so we could do a CBD based product and to look at the anxiety, pain, and other sort of the chronic condition and how best we can actually verify and prove they're working clinically and safety as well. And also we may be looking into some of the terpene based product as well along the similar line. And then obviously the last thing I would like to say, which I forgot to list is we're also interested in developing a commercial pathway and also the manufacturing capacity pathway as well, because one of our partner already committed to this CRC are manufacturers. So we could actually help to develop those pathways that's so future, because I know that especially in our clinical research with CBD, even we found it really difficult to find the manufacturer could actually manufacture those S3 or S4 or SA product, let alone mass production. So I guess that's one of the things we could help to look into that as well. I think that's all I need to say. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Dennis. So do we have any questions within the room or online? So James, so we'll go on here and then back to James.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm really excited that it's health and animals as well, and humans and animals, that there's a lot of interest in the animal sector and some other things. But just in terms of humans, well, you mentioned assisting people go through the S3 pathway at TGA. Is there any sort of, one of the really tricky things that we found companies actually have is trying to navigate the food medicine interface. And there are things like, the amino acid compounds of hemp that might make it eligible for, a 2.9, 0.5 through special medicinal purposes of hemp stands for the TGA. There's got to be a stream that actually helps people navigate, whether their product might be more appropriate stands or TGA as well.
Yeah, that's part of the plan. Fundamentally, we know there's some challenges in terms of the inconsistency in the regulation of the different categories of hemp or medicinal cannabis products, and certainly so that's one of the Hemp for Future program where we will tackle those policy consistency and also help the industry partner to navigate those landmarks, if you like.
So Dennis, we've got a question from James online. James.
Hi, James.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you for that interesting presentation, Professor Chang. Sorry, I'm having my lawn mowed outside, so there may be some background interference, but I'm very concerned about the laws on the levels of cannabinoids in human food and in the recent trials that have been done on hemp as forage. I think one in WA, they found 128 parts per million in the carcasses.
Sorry, James.
Lift your microphone up.
Yeah, they found 128 parts per million on animals that have been fed on hemp. Is there any work that you can do to actually challenge those rather low, infinitesimal limits on the levels of cannabinoids in human and animal food?
That's a very good question, James. I mean, in terms of the cannabinoid contents, I mean, the reason why TJ is taking very hard line on that is they do not understand the safety margin of that. So certainly, take example of the driving. I mean, when we're talking about how much THC should be allowed in the drivers. I mean, given that people taking medicinal cannabis, I mean, there was no research has been done in those areas. I mean, certainly that's one of the areas we could tackle that by looking into the scientific evidence to support what is the level of the cannabinoids could potentially affect the cognitive function of the animals or human in that space, and then in doing so to help TGA to make those decisions, because really they want to look at the evidence. What is the safety margin of that?
Right, thanks. We've got one more question from Nigel, and then we might move on.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi, Dennis. Hi, everybody, and great presentation. How exciting is this opportunity here? I've just got a very simple question. You mentioned a lot of CBD containing products, and it links to James's earlier question. What about non-CBD containing medicinal cannabis products? Any industry interest?
Yes, I mean that's probably, you probably refer to more like a hemp-based non-CBD product.
Well, for me, it was more kind of a full spectrum of including more cannabinoids in the product, and not just CBD focused.
Yes, that's certainly our intention. I probably haven't made that very clear. So in terms of we are very interested in look at some minor cannabinoids and cannabinoids as well. But I guess your question is whether we could actually use non-cannabinoid product of hemp or medicinal cannabis. Is that right?
Yes, and THC well.
Okay. You're still talking about those therapeutic areas. Yes, I think that will cover that. I mean, it very much depends on the interest of industry partners. So unfortunately, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but the nature of this CRC is to help industry, as you know. So from pure scientific perspective, we really want to look into all those sort of things, including the driving things I mentioned as well. But we have to have the industry partner who are interested in those space before we can really start some project. But that itself is a good research question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Dennis. We might move on to our next presenter, who is Mariam. Mariam, are you right to go?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. That's a real pleasure to be here and also present the hemp materials program. Just briefly introduce myself. My background is material science, mostly in the area of fiber science and chemistry. I'm a senior research fellow at Deakin University Institute for Frontier Materials. So before I start talking about this hemp material, as Dennis mentioned, and also I believe that probably everybody in this room and online, I know this is industry-led, bid, and we are very keen to work with industry in the material hemp program as well. What I am presenting here is basically based on the discussion and interest that we have received from our industry partners, those that we have been in discussion with them or they have made a commitment to this bid. So there is a lots of room to improve. So that's what really we need. Your interest and further contribution to make it much better as it is right now. So I just get into this program and mentioning that what we are seeing for this program, what we are going to do. First of all, I would mention that the main objective of hemp material program is to develop and extend post-harvest process for industrial hemp biomass stream. The focus is on research, obviously, into development of clean, consistent post-farm gate hemp intermediates that can be utilized in adapted composite, nonwoven, and textile processes to produce a range of hemp-based industrial and retail products. Also, we aim to develop new hemp-based products for the large textile, construction, furniture, plastic, energy, and paper markets. In this program, we aim to collaborate with other agricultural and earlier stage processing sectors to enable hemp growers to realize better returns from their stock biomass. Furthermore, in this program, we work directly with both hemp production and also hemp future programs to develop uniform standards for the growing building, textile, and bioplastic industry. Some of those things that you already heard from Sarah for the hemp production, and also later on we will hear from Tobias in terms of hemp future programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so apart from training and education that definitely we will talk about it later on, the aim that there are three main activities or three big projects into hemp materials. They are developing an end market for hemp fibers, for hemp construction materials, and hemp for new materials. Next slide, please. In the first project, where the focus is on developing an end market for hemp fiber, we need high quality and consistent feedstock materials for use in textile, non-woven, composite, and other material processes. Therefore, we are working on to provide the evaluation for productive harvest and post-harvest processes. This will be through a standardized harvest and post-harvest processes and best management practice for realizing high quality post-harvest farm gate material. We also work toward adoption of quality assurance test methods for growers to assess farm gate prices for harvested and semi-refined material. And finally, in this project, we are hoping to develop local and export markets for hemp-haired fiber and dust fractions. Also, the aim to reach to the level that can provide equipment and process path for the effective removal of haired and separation of the fibers to enable spinning, also providing a spinning process path that produce high quality yarn. Test and analyze the optimal temporary reconfiguration of the cotton gin infrastructure to remove hemp fiber from their stock. Here we aim to enhance our capability to increase the benefits for farmers, where they can get the most of their investment. Already, as you may know, that cotton gin assets are worth hundreds of millions of dollars around Australia, and almost around 3 to 6 months they are dormant in the off season. We trying to look into utilizing the gins to process hemp in the off season to provide more proactive or productive use of these gins. And finally, we aim to provide a uniform standard for hemp fiber and quality measurement protocols and establishment of the operational standards. Next slide, please. So in hemp for construction materials project, through working with industry and research, we are aiming to provide the optimal formulation of hemp hair, reinforcement, sand, stone, binding agent, etc., to be able to produce hempcrete, insulation panels, or hemp wood at scale. We'll look into hemp fiber as a reinforcement to replace steel, and geopolymer to replace lime or cement as a binding agent in hempcrete. We also aim to validate and demonstrate hemp material properties for thermal insulation, energy saving, fireproof, termite resistant, breathable walls, and limited waste products. And finally, we aim to provide one uniform building standard that has been approved by government regulators and has been co-designed with industry and determine carbon sequestered in a hemp house that is constructed. Next slide, please. And the last one, not the least one, in this program, we are aiming in designing, developing and producing next generation of the textile or bioplastic that enable greater reuse, remanufacturing, recycling, and degradation. This is where we are looking at hemp as a very sustainable material to reduce the waste in both textile and also plastic industries. We aim to develop bio-based hemp-derived fibers and polymers in the technical and functional form ready for production. Developing a sustainable fabrication process to transform fibers and polymers into textile or plastics with the specific capability for recycling and reuse with minimum deterioration of the original material base. You know, as I mentioned, I'm really looking forward to working with you, with our industry partner to elaborate on, you know, the challenges and, you know, accommodate all of these challenges and industry needs into the hemp materials program. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marion. Do we have any questions from the room? Yep.
Yes, thanks for that great presentation. Just as a general overview of the developments that you're doing in your department, what's sort of the plan, obviously working with CRC, how to share some of these findings and these manufacturing practices. We're just returned from Canada looking at different processes and manufacturing solutions that they have out there. So very, very keen to know how we share this as you guys develop.
You know, thank you that, you know, if the question is related to IP, I believe that, am I right? Is it related to some of the work that, you know, industry partner has been done and they want to work with a CRC and then, you know, improve or enhance what they have done? Is it regarding that part or?
Yeah, just in general, if it's an industry partner, I get that whatever they put in and the IP you produce together, they want to protect and market. But I just wondered if there was going to be, you talked to some general practices and some standards, so just seeing how those will get shared.
Sure. Sure. You know, probably Gavin can help on this one, but to my understanding is that, you know, obviously all of the researchers working closely with the industry partner for each industry needs, there is a you know, define an individual work which, you know, that researcher or, you know, university organization work with that industry partner on their needs. And, you know, and then still, because it is like a company, we do have access to all of the facility. Not only, for example, myself, I'm from Deakin, you know, all of the researcher and the team working with me, we do have access to the facility that is there in Deakin, but still there is a great chance that we can collaborate with other university or other organizations which are partner in this CRC to get the benefit of the knowledge of the other researcher working in that area, and also the equipment is there. So you know, I'm sorry if I you know, answer your question, but I believe that Gavin probably can answer from the other side of the CRC.
So I think that the question is about things like standards and approaches like that, which are of general interest, of broader interest than specific company interests.
Yeah, well, there's also, I get the standards, that's really great, but there's more technology transfer, technology share. But I think she's answered it, that if it's a independent IP, then, you know, we'll have to focus on whoever's got the IP.
Yeah, so that we'll have a fairly strong IP position within the CRC, but also we'll have a conversation a little bit later from CSIRO, which will talk about that to some
I
extent.
was just going to add, Wade and Miriam, I mean, if you're extending out, there'll be commercial technology available in Canada, and I imagine what the Australian situation will be, and with some of our investors in the hemp industry, is that we will go over and buy it. And we will operate it here, and like a lot of other industries, we'll operate it like the Canadians at a higher efficiency than our USA cousins, I imagine.
Sure.
Yeah, so I relate particularly the idea of our cotton and ginning industry. It's all US technology, but the gins here are the most productive in the world in terms of output, right, and safety and efficiencies. So that is a model that I think the hemp industry will want to follow.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much, Stu.
Just one more from Eric, and then we might. Eric had his hand up, so you might.
Oh, sorry, Eric. Yeah, sorry, Eric. I couldn't see you there. You're in the darkness. There.
There we are. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
First off, I take exception to the USA comment, by the way. Just kidding. My question to Miriam was about, have you looked into for end market biofuels as well? We're starting to get some airlines that have approached us about hemp for biofuel. And I was curious if you had looked into that at all.
Thank you so much, Eric. That's a great question. This is actually, we received a question and, the contact from one of the industry, seed to fuel in Australia. So it seems that they were very keen for this project, getting hemp and making biofuel. But unfortunately, even though we follow up with them, we didn't receive any further response. So, as I mentioned, this is industry-led, program and CRC. If we don't get the request from industry, if they don't contribute to CRC, obviously, we cannot put this into the, that needs into the CRC individual program. So that would be great if we can get, industry partner for that specific biofuel.
All right, well, let's continue that conversation offline.
Sure,
maybe.
sure. Thank you. Yeah,
great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. We might keep moving. Our next speaker is Claire Delice, who is going to talk a little bit about the Futures program. Thanks very much, Mariam. That was great.
That's right.
And I'll
don't think that people might much feedback. So I'm Tobias Kretschmar. I'm associate professor at Southern Cross University. I'm heading the plant breeding and genetics portfolio there for 4 years, working on hemp and medicinal cannabis mainly, but we do other crops like coffee, tea tree, and rice as well. I'll be leading the Hemp Futures program. I think one of the things that differs in Hemp Futures from the other 3 programs you've heard is that it's supposed to be cross-cutting. So it's supposed to support the other 3 pillars more broadly with novel technologies, policy information, and also around business models. So Hemp Futures, I believe, is not blue sky research, so don't get scared there. We're not trying to go off on a tangent. It's actually more about catching up with the past, and I'll talk a bit about that later, because hemp has really missed out in terms of technology development. Many other crops are way ahead of hemp, and that has to do with regulation and policy prohibiting research into hemp. And a lot of that also has to do with rectifying some of the policy mistakes that have been made in the past. And finally, it's about capitalizing on new business models or new paradigm shifts towards zero waste economies and net zero carbon. So you can go to the next slide. So broadly, we identified in hemp technologies together with the industry partners that have interest in that space, 3 broad categories. And I'll just put them up here in the next 3 slides. I will just present a few project ideas that we have around those categories that were developed already with our business partners, but there's room for more improvement there. So I think Future hemp technologies is really around bringing hemp up to speed with where other crops are, and that's not only in respect to genetics. So hemp breeding, I think, is it's in its infancy, but there's a lot of other tech going into algorithms, AI, and these sort of things where hemp can really need a bit of catching up. Hemp future business models will be all around capitalizing on those paradigm shifts I mentioned. So that's being able to sequester your carbon, being able to get carbon capture or sequestration, getting credits for those, but also really moving towards a zero waste strategy. I think hemp is a bit of a Swiss Army knife of crops. There's a use for everything that's been on hemp, but traditionally, looking way into the past, it's all been utilized to its maximum extent, and all that's kind of been swept under the carpet over the last century or so. So we kind of want to revive this and modernize it in a way that it fits with new drivers around net zero and circular economies. And lastly, we really want to start changing policy. I think Australia is way behind in terms of legislation, in terms of other countries, in terms of policy we have catching up to do. We want to generate all the data that's necessary to inform regulatory agencies, be able to support our industry partners to put in applications with the APBMA, with TGA, with FSANS or Standards Australia. So you can go to the next slide now. These are now examples for hemp technologies. This is really my hobby horse and my favorite playing field, so I go a bit more in depth there. We can do the others later. So I think first and foremost, we need a gene bank. I don't think there's a single successful crop in this world that doesn't have a gene bank to rely on to draw traits out of variety improvement, but also to safeguard germplasm for the future. And that should include everything that's coming out of breeding programs. There's no national gene bank in Australia. In fact, there isn't any national gene banks anywhere in the world. The only gene banks that did survive prohibition are all in the east of Europe. So there's a good gene bank somewhere in St. Petersburg that we probably won't be able to access anymore. There's a good one in former Eastern Germany, and we already drew all that germplasm in. So we are sitting on around 100 diverse lines of legacy germplasm already, and that's free to share. So we envision a gene bank that is open access, being able to provide to breeders, farmers, growers, but also have, and that's more for the cannabis space, managed germplasm for industry partners. So we've been doing that for several companies. They bring their proprietary germplasm to us. We manage that, we characterize that, and add value to existing collections. Second one would be around zero THC hemp. I think it's possible. There have been avenues in that. I think Australia started in that space again, and I think there's a lot of value for hemp growers if they have certainty around their crop will never fail compliance. But also it would help branding, it would help shifting hemp away from a bit of the dirty, illicit associations that it's still kind of caught in. That can be done either by traditional approaches or novel gene editing technologies, and that really, again, depends on the end market. If it's fiber, I think nobody would mind. All the cotton is GM, so why not have a GM hemp for fiber? But for the food space, I think it would have to be conventional. What's really missing, I think, for hemp is seed systems. There's no certification process that's really in there, and that could be linked to basically certified zero quality, zero THC hemp. But hemp being dioecious, having separate male and female plants, I think there's a big opportunity in going down the hybrid avenue. A lot of crops are very successful in the hybrid space, and I think hemp could play a major role there too. That would be good for growers because a hybrid crop by definition is consistent. Every individual will look exactly the same because they're genetically identical, which is a big problem in conventional hemp at the moment. But it would also create incentives for seed developers, because if you're having a hybrid crop that guarantees that every season the growers will come back to the seed suppliers to get fresh supply because you can't regenerate the hybrids. So I think getting something going in that space would create a lot of momentum. And finally, that's around feminized or masculinized seeds that's been used in the medicinal space already. I think there's opportunity to ramp that up at scale. Farmers growing for seed, they'd be happy with 90% females, because I think 1 to 5% of males will provide enough pollen to pollinate everything. That can be done with feminized seed. And I think farmers growing for fiber, I don't know if that's anecdotal, I'm not in the fiber space, but I think males tend to produce higher quality fibers. So you might be looking at something masculinized. So shifting male and female ratios, since it's a dioecious crop, is going to be very important on the track, just to maximize yield. And finally, in technologies, these are quality assurance tools. These are predictive tools. We're developing a device, for example, where you can stick a bud in and it will tell you the THC and CBD contents. I think there's lots of value again for farmers to get security around compliance before they go testing. But I'm envisioning that same for seed, where you drop your seed into a little box, press a button, you get oil content, water content, protein content that help you grade your seed and get a better prices for it. Those are just examples, and I'm happy to get more from you guys, and you can switch to the next slide. Business models. So this is all about carbon. I guess carbon sequestration has been around as a potential for hemp. I think we need a lot of hard data around that to actually manage that system, but we also need a lot of modeling around that space. Now, I'm not only talking about direct sequestration, that's putting it into the soil, but I think hemp char is an opportunity for more long-term sequestration of carbon, but I'm also talking about biofuels here and anything that will offset carbon in any way. That goes hand in hand with zero waste strategies. I already mentioned you can use any part of the plant, potentially it's deregulated. We should be aiming towards promoting hemp as a crop where nothing's wasted. Life cycle assessments are needed there, getting your carbon footprint established around hemp that helps in marketing down the track. And in the medicinal space, I think there's a lot of work needed to reduce inputs, because at the moment, funny enough, what we're proposing hemp is the low carbon crop. Medicinal cannabis has the worst carbon footprint of any crop in the world, and that's a subject that hasn't been touched. But I think if you want to streamline it, those questions will come up, because if you're growing with lights, the amount of carbon you produce with medicinal at the moment goes through. And finally, something that a lot of industry partners are interested here is how do we manage waste, how we add value to Schedule 8 waste, because at the moment medicinal producers, they sit on a lot of waste that could potentially be value added. You could probably extract other secondary metabolites out of that, or use that to go into a bioreactor to heat up your greenhouses. So waste management in the medicinal space is completely different from hemp again. In hemp, I think we can add value to almost anything. In medicinal cannabis, it's a nuisance, because it's just as hard to regulate your waste in medicinal as it is to regulate your product. And final slide, please. So policy, this I'm terming it policy, but I think I also want to touch on marketing there, because I think hemp would really benefit from better marketing strategy. But I think these two things again go hand in hand. Good example in policy is we're working on a Fazan's application at the moment. We're trying to deregulate other parts of hemp for human or animal consumption that would add value to byproducts of hemp and create extra revenue. Best example from overseas is the US Farm Bill. If hemp seed farmers could extract the CBD from the chaff, they would get a really good byproduct. Again, we are going to be lobbying regulators, but we'll also mostly work with the industry partners to generate the data that's necessary for these applications. That's APVMA, Fazan's, those are probably the obvious targets there. And that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But the good thing is, if we have a solution once, that a solution will of course apply to the whole industry. And in marketing, I think consumer perception is changing. I think there's a lot of value in trying to shift that even further, see where can we leverage that, how can we leverage that. Example here is that at the moment, in Australia, at least, you're not even allowed to use that hemp leaf, which is an iconic thing. And I think it would really appeal to a lot of the younger consumers. You can't use that for marketing for hemp because it's still stigmatized and it's just not allowed to use it. So being able to draw that into marketing strategies and also doing your research, seeing who you're targeting, who are your clients, who are your consumers, will help the industry to just get up to speed. And there's a lot of examples where that worked really well. And that be it from me for the moment.
Right, thank you very much. I want to step into just that spot.
I'm in the wrong spot.
Yes, you told me. Any questions from the room? This stage?
Sorry, I mean, the marketing research suggests that we'll need some social scientists in the room as well. Is that right? Or...
Yeah, I think that will be driven by social scientists. Yeah. So there's we do have that capacity at Southern Cross, I think, but I think there's the other universities will have their departments as well. So I think that's something we should not miss, and I think AgroFutures has realized that as well. to get emerging industries off the ground, you need to get your marketing right, and you need to do your market research so you know who you're targeting.
What are the current parameters around Schedule 8 waste, as in being a buyer of that? Are there legal licenses or their licenses required to purchase Schedule 8 waste?
To purchase the waste, no, it's mostly the industry is concerned of how they deal with their waste. So a lot of it's expensive to, incineration is one option. That's what we do, for example, but we have to get a police escort, get it to an incinerator. It costs you a lot of money and there's a lot of risk attached.
Yeah, byproducts in Canada, America, making waves and moves, that kind of waste material. I think we could tailor a lot of research.
On research that's been done on that, yeah. So we have industry partners that are sitting on 2 tons of waste a week and they don't really know how to value it. And at the moment, it just adds to their cost rather than adding value. And I think, again, it has to do, there's a bit of an interplay with research and informing policy to be able to allow to actually value add to that.
There's a funny country in America, there's more carbon dioxide created from burning or extracted hemp biomaterial than there is in actually producing it.
Tobias, does this go into our meeting yesterday about the bio-waste and pyrolysis? Yeah, so we had a sort of an idea of a lot of the municipal companies we were talking to had that exact same problem. So there's some technology going around where you can put all the bio-waste, use pyrolysis, which you get biochar, which one company already has a carbon offtake with Spotify and Microsoft. They actually make most of their money with that. So you have the biochar you can use as fertilizer, you get carbon credits for that. In the pyrolysis, you also get syngas, which you can burn as well, and use the energy off site. So something around that, could be an opportunity because that seems to be a constant issue.
Yeah,
and it's around scalability there. So I think most people would want on-site solutions there, small scale, and quite often these syngas and pyrolysis solutions, they work best at massive scale. But that means you're going to have to cart the trash around again with police escorts. That's not going to be very viable. So being able to scale that down to the right level so people can use it on scale, on site is going to be.
Or jump over from the point of view of saying there will be zero waste, 100% utilisation of fine waste. Everything makes money, nothing costs money.
That's the goal there.
And that has to be where you go. You may not get it. You have to have that aspiration because then everybody.
And hemp is an ideal crop for that. I think the medicinal cannabis.
Well, I would have said so. It's thousands of years. It's natural. It's organic. Everyone can relate to what it is. A massive platform which you can work with. You can go back 2,000-3,000 years and pull the information out. That's all part of it. Bernie's world, either.
Go back 100 years already. I mean, I just watched Hemp for Victory again yesterday, which is a 1940s. That was really to get me working for this. Yeah, but it's a great video that promotes the use of hemp to get the Allies to win the Second World War, and then afterwards again the kind of.
Right. So we have one more question from Tim in the room, and then we have a question from Phil, and that's from Mark.
Yeah, just quickly, not so much a question. The Tasmania government has granted the Tasmanian Hemp Association $100,000 to run a social media campaign. Espouse the benefits of Tasmanian hemp seed to the consumers, and of course there'll be add-on benefits to the hemp industry generally in raising the profile of the industry.
Exactly. We have small scale partners that are investing into social media campaigns because they see the benefit, and they might be just looking at the industry, but the social media always is broad. So whatever happens there, and there's no thing is bad publicity. Getting it out there and really shouting it out loud is what's needed at the moment.
So we have a question from Phil Warner online.
Oh, hi guys. It's not so much a question, it's something that we should not forget. Australia has a wonderful spread of latitudes, and those latitudes allow us to do trials of different varieties right across what basically covers the commercial production area of the world, from 12 degrees latitude to 43 degrees latitude. Now, there are not many places on the planet, there are a few, Chile is one, China's got a good coverage as well, where you can move your trials around enough to really see the benefit of the best latitude to grow a certain day-length flowering crop. Now, the big end of town, whether it's the automotive industry or other industries, all require certainty of supply of materials. So the other advantage for Australia is the fact that we are in summer opposite to, of course, the northern hemisphere, which means continuity of supply and risk management of biomass and other supply requirements, so that everybody's a lot happier with their uptake of a new source of material. So in plant breeding, it's really important to have those latitudes and express that to other countries that might be partnering in this this particular plant breeding program. Of course, we're not like Canada, where we're sort of like 43 to, or is it 45 or 7 to 60 odd degrees north, but we cover a very large area of commercial production of crops in the world, and I think that's an advantage we should utilise in attracting other researchers too. Now, just another example of what we used to do, or I used to do, was I would grow tropical varieties for seed in the winter in northern Queensland, or in even down to central New South Wales. Then we would plant that seed in the higher latitudes, which had a greater day length during summer, to get super yields that they wouldn't achieve, for fibre this is, wouldn't achieve at their natural latitude, which has, doesn't really get above 13 or 12 degrees latitude, whereas you got 16 degrees, hours, 12 to 13 hours in summer, or 14 hours maximum, whereas in Tasmania, that plant will grow a lot taller, give a greater yield of biomass, because it's sitting in 16 hours of light, which is, after all, what helps those things grow so well. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's an advantage Australia has and should tout worldwide with researchers into genetics and the actual production of crops. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks very much, Phil. So we might wrap it up there.
I'm sorry,
That's all right. That's fine. So we're going to, at the moment, take a short break, so you can have a quick